doing well. Today I'm going to bring you another installment of ABBA-Zappa. This is basically my CD collection where I've been painstakingly going through every CD that I own. Now, if you joined me on my last installment, I did make a part on R, going through all of my CDs that begin with the letter R. And I did leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger saying that there is one particular band that I totally missed out that I'm going to be focusing on exclusively on this video. Now, this is, well, you can tell by the title, all about the Rolling Stones, one of my favourite groups of all time. And the reason why I've had to make an exclusive video is because, well, I own a lot of Rolling Stone albums, and I thought, well, why not make one dedicated purely to them. So hope you guys enjoy me going through the discography of the Rolling Stones right here, right now. Some of you may be aware that a lot of the early material the Rolling Stones released, when it came to releasing these studio albums, if you live over in the United States, you might find that a lot of the releases that were brought out by the Stones in the sort of early to mid-60s differ quite a lot to the pressings over here in the UK. And I could go into detail for that, however, I've never really gotten to the point where I own both the US and the UK copies of these records. So forgive me for only talking exclusively for what I believe are the UK albums, may not be. However, I'm still going to be talking about them because it's worth noting that a lot of the UK versions of these records mostly focused on having unique studio cuts, whereas the US ones would sometimes take off some of these unique songs and actually would sort of replace them with what were at the time the freshest singles that the Rolling Stones would release. So first we're going to start with England's newest hitmakers, also known just as the Rolling Stones. In fact, the spine just says that. Pretty good debut. This is kind of basic R&B and sort of very roots-orientated rock and roll music. Highlights on here being Not Fade Away, Now I've Got a Witness. I'm a King Bee is a great one. Carol's a classic, one of their famous singles. Route 66 a good song. Pretty strong debut. You'll also notice that some of these are sort of like this. That's because the Rolling Stones actually released SACDs as well as the normal compact discs. These are basically in gold, and if you're lucky enough to acquire a SACD playing machine, don't know what you'd call it, they are reported to have higher quality than your normal CDs. So whether or not SACDs beat out actual records like vinyl, I'm not sure, but they're still pretty cool to own. And Nebby's one day, I doubt it, I might actually replace a lot of the early material by the Stones and I just have SACDs. I don't think they made SACDs with their later material. Basically, ABBA in 2002 released all of their early stuff, and then I think pretty much from Let It Bleed onwards, they started releasing stuff in 2009, which were kind of like jewel cases, and finished off the rest of the Stones' discography. So occasionally you will see SACDs. Anyways, this is also just called the Rolling Stones 2, but I've got 12 times 5. On here are songs like Susie Q, a pretty, in my opinion, underwhelming version of Under the Broadwalk, Empty Heart, Time Is On My Side, and It's All Over Now. Pretty good sophomore record. However, I think things get a lot better with the Rolling Stones now, their third album. Now, at least this version that I own has some of my favourite early Stones, like Little Red Rooster is one of my favourites, Heart of Stone, Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, Mona as well. A lot of great tracks on here, but my personal favourite, like I say, is Little Red Rooster. Awesome track, that. Things are going to start getting confusing when it comes to December's Children and then Out of Our Heads, because there's a UK and US version of Out of Our Heads, and I don't think December's Children even existed over in the US. However, all of these albums basically had a lot of crossovers when it comes to tracks, so at least to make sense of it, I own December's Children, which comparatively to the US version of Out of Our Heads, I don't think there's any crossover with tracks when it comes to owning these two. So with December's Children, we've got a great start of the album, which She Said Yeah, that's a great track, and then we'll start seeing some really, really big tracks by the Stones on here, like Get Off My Cloud, I'm Free, As Tears Go By, I'm Moving On. Great tracks. And then when it comes to the US version of Out of Our Heads, we've got tracks like Mercy Mercy, the Under-Assisted West Coast Promotion Man, The Spider and the Fly is a great track, Good Times as well, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, Play With Fire, yeah, that's also awesome. We also have a US and UK version of this, Aftermath. As you can see, this is a SACD version. Oh, what has just popped out there? Wow, look at me, everybody, a certificate of authenticity on our special. And at the very back, for some reason, we see John Lennon. I think that is a zoomed-in, cropped cover of Their Satanic Majestic's Request, I guess. Very, very weird. Anyway, so Aftermath was released around 66, I believe, and this is when things started getting a bit more psychedelic when the mod scene came up. Now, the real interesting song in here is Going Home, which is a huge sprawling track, which I don't know what sort of genre you classify that. It's basically progressive blues, I suppose you would classify it as. We'll get some beautiful tracks on here, though. Mother's Little Helper is on this. Stupid Girl's great. Lady Jane is a beautiful track, Under My Thumb as well. Gorgeous song of that. As well as that, we've got Out of Time, Take It or Leave It. It's a pretty long album, and there's a few duds here and there, but there's so many highlights on there too. things get even more interesting when it comes to 1967 with the album Between the Buttons. We've got great tracks here, like Yesterday's Paper, Backstreet Girl, She Smells Sweet is a kind of like a psychedelic pop gem. Cool, Calm and Collected is such a catchy number. Please Go Home as well, Miss Amanda Jones, Something Happened to Me Yesterday. This is when we start basically seeing Rolling Stones album as like a whole, basically collectively very, very high quality album, and this is basically the start of this. And some people would then say they fell off when it comes to the quality because they say Satanic Majestic Request is a very controversial album by the Rolling Stones because whilst we saw them dabble here and there with psychedelic pop and rock, they went full on in this record. It was deemed a Sgt. Pepper ripoff by a lot of people, and just basically seen by people as the Rolling Stones just trying to follow suit what was popular at the time. And I think they didn't help themselves when basically the following year they just totally gave up on making psychedelic stuff and went back to the blues stuff that they were more renowned for. However, even though this is an album that sticks out quite much like a sore thumb for their discography as a whole, I love this record, and just because I just love psychedelic music. And there's a few duds, of course, I will say there are a few duds, like Sing This All Together and See What Happens is just like 8-9 sort of minutes of just psychedelic dirge. On With the Show is like their attempt at some sort of vaudeville music hall, attempts at comedy, and it's just terrible as well. However, there's no arguing that there aren't classics on here. Now, the obvious choices, 2,000 Light Years from Home and She's a Rainbow, both two of some of the best Rolling Stones songs ever. But I love songs like The Lantern and Gomper as well. Love Gomper. That's a very underrated song, I think, by the Rolling Stones. So I think this is a great album, really, despite a few tracks here and there. But of course, going back to SACD territory as well, we've got Beggar's Banquet too, going from 1968 with the, I think what was at the time, the band cover, that wasn't allowed. And with this album, they, like I say, basically went back to their roots, but that does not mean that they didn't make a fantastic album here, because they just basically were doing what they were doing a few years prior and just bumped the ante when it came to quality. As well as that, of course, they started more predominantly writing their own music too, which makes it more interesting. And the obvious choice on this record is like, well, Sympathy for the Devil, one of their biggest songs, as well as that, Street Fighting Man, awesome track too. But I want to give a shout out to songs like Dear Doctor, which is an awesome blues song, Parachute Woman, and if I had to say a favourite, not counting the two real big singles, Jigsaw Puzzle, that's an awesome track, and that is an awesome album. This is one of my favourites ever, easily Let It Bleed. Awesome blues rock. It's just basically back to back, just epic upon epic tracks on here. The first track, Gimme Shelter, it just blows away when I first heard it. Just I forgot the name of the female backing singer, but she absolutely kills it. It reminds me of what the singer does on The Great Gig in the Sky by Pink Floyd, how despite the voice breaking, which you would just assume is bad singing, the passion that goes into the vocals just sells it and just makes that song, which would have been great even without it, just excel into some of the best songs that were released in the 60s. But then we've got like awesome songs like Midnight Rambler, which is another sort of progressively long track, but just is a better track overall, so works. We also get the sort of tear in the beer, You Can't Always Get What You Want, which is an awesome song. Country Honk is a great fun song. Monkey Man as well. You got The Silver, Love in Vain's a gorgeous tune. I could go on, but oh, and the song Let It Bleed too. So classic, absolute masterpiece there. I do own a live album by them, one of my favourite album covers. Get your yayas out, because I love donkeys, and I love it when Charlie smiles for once and he seems really happy here. So yeah, I love this record, and this is a really, really good live album. Really recommend it. This is like the one to put on when you want a big road trip, basically. Highly recommend that. And then we get to probably my favourite Rolling Stones album, which is Sticky Fingers, with the very famous Andy Warhol album cover. I do own it on record as well, but it's just buried with a load of other ones. That was a real zip, and I'll just not go into any more detail than that. Why is this a favourite? Well, just purely because I feel that every track, just the quality of every track for me just really resonates. Now, what's on here? I mean, I think the only track on here that I'm not huge on is You Gotta Move. That's the only one. But every other track is absolutely killer. Brown Sugar, Sway, love that song. Wild Horses, gorgeous song. Can't You Hear Me Knocking, awesome track. Bitch, awesome song. Sister Morphine, Moonlight Mile. I mean, if you're not going to get a best of, obviously, because I'm going to say this anyways because it's my favourite, but please check out that album. A lot of people think this is their best album. They're going to Exile on Main Street. This is like a double album, and there's a few mixed bag of songs, but we've got Rocks Off. I remember putting that on first time when I was back in school, and I played it like, must have played like 10 times that same day, because I just couldn't believe how cool it was. I love that song. Rip This Joint, Shake It Here. I mean, it starts really solid, like Tumble and Die, Sweet Virginia, Love and Cup as well, Happy, Soul Survivor. Yeah, there are loads of fantastic songs as well. Let It Loose is good. Just other ones, just like I say, just meander a bit, not the best. Now, the reason why it's like this is because they did at the time release a deluxe edition of this, and I think they have went back over the years and like done deluxe editions of other albums, but for a long time it was basically just this and another album that's going to come out soon in my collection here. And some great tracks on here and some alternate takes and stuff. Dancing in the Light and Following the River, great songs. Just makes you surprised how some of them basically didn't meet the cut and then other songs did. But yeah, now then. So this is when a lot of people felt that the Rolling Stones fell off. I, again, love this album, Goat's Head Soup. And this is one of their more experimental albums, definitely. Now, we get your typical rockers like Dancing with Mr. D, Coming Down Again is like a sort of ballad you expect from them. Heartbreaker's a great stomper. Angie's a classic, a lot of people would agree with that. But then we get really strange songs, like 100 Years Ago, which is, I don't even know how you describe that song. Then we've got songs like Star Star, which isn't really what it's called, which is a very vulgar song by them. Then you've got Winter, which is a very strange song as well. Can You Hear the Music is weird. I mean, it's stuff that you would have expected maybe they would have tried on the Satanic Majestic's request, but in a way even stranger too. So Goat's Head Soup is a strange one, but I think it's a great album. And then they went from experimental a lot to taking it back to the drawing board with It's Only Rock and Roll. And like, there are great tracks in here. I love like Luxury, Fingerprint File. The title track's a great rock and roll song, but this one is just not the one that I return to a lot, just because I just feel that they've done a lot better. Now, there are a few compilations I've missed out here. There's a few best ofs that have some unreleased music that I used to own, and an obvious one is the Comp Flowers, which had a lot of B-sides and such when they attempted psychedelic music, which, you know, has a lot of great tracks on there, but I guess I just never bought a copy or I just gave it away. But I do own this, which is called Metamorphosis, or Metamorphose. Obviously famous Playboy Cardi, obviously Franz Kafka inspired here. And this is released in 1975, and this is kind of like an alternate take / outtake album that spans from I mean, judging by the songs on here, I think go all the way back to must be 1965 or even 4. And there's some alternate takes which you might not be too interested in, like for example the much more orchestrated version of Out of Time and other alternate takes. But then we've got some pretty big highlights. For example, we've got Memo from Turner, which was a song Mick Jagger done when he performed in Performance, which was a film from 1970, I believe. It's a very weird film, but that's a good track. Other favourites, like I say, is songs like I Don't Know Why, which I think was done around the time. Well, it was done around the time when a certain huge member sadly passed away from around 1969. Other ones as well, like Heart of Stone, Downtown Susie is a very interesting sort of bluesy song, especially with the band vocals. It's worth a listen, definitely, but I wouldn't say, oh, you've got to try that first thing if you get into the Stones. Now, along with Goat Set Soup, I think this is a contender for one of the most underrated Rolling Stones albums, Black and Blue. Now, this one, I think, attempts to go for a bit of like a tropical flair to it, and I nearly put it on a video that I've made, which was focusing on summer albums, because maybe it's just coincidence because I used to listen to it a lot in the summer, but I feel like when they, for example, go for like a reggae tune on Cherry O Baby, there's a song called Hot Stuff as well. But honestly, guys, it's not a perfect album, but there's some songs on here which rank as some of my favourite Rolling Stones songs, like Feel to Cry and Memory Motel. I love them tracks specifically, those two are just amazing songs, so please don't skip this, there's some real highlights on there. Now, I did mention Exile on Main Street had a deluxe edition, and this is another one that they've done Some Girls. I'll quickly say the deluxe edition on here is very interesting because the songs that didn't make the drawing board, that actually, instead of just being outtakes that they were done back then, I believe with this, at the time of when they released this deluxe edition, they actually went over and recreated the songs. So almost the Stones basically released an album in 2010, and it just so happened that the songs were written 30 years before that the album was recorded. So that's worth getting the deluxe edition at one. But also on top of that, Some Girls is a great album. This is obviously late 70s, so this was when the likes of new wave and disco was becoming a big thing, and the Rolling Stones managed to kind of have both of them fit to a T very well on here. Now, we've got some great tracks like the classic title track as well, Beast of a Burden, which is a real tearjerker, Shattered is an awesome rocker, but then of course the obvious track to go for is Miss You, which is one of their biggest songs too. That's a classic. It's weird as well mentioning what I was saying before about how a lot of the songs missing the drawing board actually became outtakes and eventually were released in 2010, because the next album is also basically outtakes from that era, which is Emotional Rescue. Definitely not as high a quality. We've got songs like Indian Girl, which I'm not too big on, but then other tracks which are pretty good, like She's So Cold, Dance Part 1, Send It To Me is alright. It's not a bad album, but not one I return to often. Pretty good album here with Tattoo You, the songs like Waiting on a Friend, which I really, really enjoy. Neighbours is pretty cool, Black Limousine, and of course Start Me Up, which is another of their biggest songs too. And then we start getting into territories where a lot of people try and forget about this era of the Rolling Stones, which is like the mid-80s, with stuff like Undercover. This isn't a bad album, like Undercover of the Night, She Was Hot, Too Much Blood's pretty cool, All the Way Down's alright, Wanna Hold You's okay, but this is definitely getting to the period where like this should be one of the albums that you start to pick up last, I certainly did. This is definitely one of the last ones I picked up too, which is called Dirty Work. This was a very bleak time in the Rolling Stones era. They basically all hated each other. I mean, you can see there Keith Richards is very close to naming Mick Jagger into his very special area, and as you can tell by the outfits as well, this is very 80s too. Now, there are some good tracks on here. I like One Hit to the Body, I think it kicks off really well. Fight's an interesting song, and then Harlem Shuffle as well is a pretty cool song. But then there's just tracks on here where you're just like, whatever, which is a good majority of the album, sadly. So it's not a totally terrible album, there's still highlights, but Dirty Work is not a one to return to a lot. Now the Rolling Stones basically kind of broke up, but returned in '89 with the album Steel Wheels. And this is a good album, again, not amazing. Songs like Mixed Emotions, Terrifying's a catchy song, Rockin' a Hard Place is pretty good, Sad Sad Sad, the first track's alright, Almost Here You Sigh is a pretty good song as well. Oh, and Blinded by Love, I used to really like that song too. So I've named quite a lot of songs there, but again, just these other tracks which are pretty skippable. Then in '94 we had Voodoo Lounge. This one includes a lot of good tracks, like Through and Through, Blinded by Rainbows is a gorgeous song, a really good rocker is Suck on the Jugular, that's a pretty kick-ass song, You Got Me Rockin', Sparks Will Fly's pretty good, and Out of Tears is an alright track too. So I'd say this is a bit better than Steel Wheels, but again, not perfect, but still worth checking out. Then I think this came out in '97, this is Bridges to Babylon. This is one that I always think of, if anyone knows the Lion Bar Chocolate, I always think of that cover for some reason. This has the single Anybody Say My Baby, which is pretty good. Saint Amazing is pretty good as well. First track's alright, Low Down's good, Out of Control. This isn't, to me, as good as the previous one, Voodoo Lounge, but it's not a bad album. Then in 2009, so a huge break, we got this, which is A Bigger Bang. Oh no, this came out in 2005, sorry. I said 2009 because, like I say, all of these things where it's got this sort of interesting shell case CD were remastered, including A Bigger Bang. Yes, this was remastered 4 years after it was released. Whatever. Now, if you want to say stuff like From Steel Wheels onwards is more modern Rolling Stones, then I would say from there up to the present day, this is their best album. Now, it's a very long album, and again, it's not perfect. However, I will say that there's some of their best material that they've written around this time. Rough Justice, I can't see anyone disliking that for like the rock and Rolling Stones. I love Let Me Down Slow. I think that's such a catchy track. Rainfall Down is awesome. Great drumming on that especially too. I mean, there's 16 tracks on here. Laughing, I Nearly Died, I love as well. Back My Hand, Biggest Mistake. There's a lot of great tracks on here, so really recommend that. And what a cool album cover. I mean, you've got these stickers which are covering it, but I love that album cover too. And basically the last album that they released, which was in 2016, is Blue and Lonesome. And, well, certainly Blue, and I'd say it's lonesome, as in you would feel lonesome if you wanted a Rolling Stones album that had original material, because this is all covers, all real covers of real classic blues stuff. That's why it's called Blue. And, yeah, pretty good material. It's, again, just not one I return to. I mean, they nail it in terms of the sounds of the blues stuff. It's the like stuff like Just Your Fool, and the title track, and I Gotta Go, I Can't Quit Your Baby. Yeah, I mean, it is a good album, and it's to the point where you think, what do you expect from a group of guys who are in their mid to late 70s? You know, obviously not a lot. But despite that, I still want to say that this is a pretty good record. Certainly a lot better than a lot of bands who have been going on for as long as the Rolling Stones and attempt to release an album. Oh, by the way, recently it was Mick Jagger's 80th birthday, so happy birthday, Mick. And here's to more Rolling Stones music, because the guys never seem to quit, and good on them. You're aware. Well, that is it, everybody. I've went through my entire collection of Rolling Stones albums. I hope you enjoyed it. And like I say, I'm sure there's live albums and comps that I'm missing out here and there, but for now I'm pretty satisfied with the collection I've got there. until Rolling Stone send me release a new album. Who knows? But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed my collection, and if you like my CD collection stuff, then obviously stick around, because eventually I will do part, well, S. So thanks again for watching, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and bye for now.